Hi, I am Dave Maass, and this is Kate Tummarello. We are both on EFF's activism team, and we have been sitting in front of our computers for a very long time, starting at 6:30 a.m. Pacific time, a hazard of living in California. And the reason we've been doing that is we have been watching Senator Jeff Sessions' confirmation hearing. If you're not familiar with Senator Jeff Sessions, he was tapped by President-elect Trump to head up the Department of Justice as Attorney General, and that means he has to go through a rigorous vetting process by the Senate Judiciary Committee. And this year it is a two-day affair. Yesterday he went the long haul and took lots of questions, and then today we have assorted panelists who've been discussing him. Kate is one of our resident DC experts, and she has been following along and doing a lot of our live blogging, which you can find on EFF.org. I believe it's at the top of the page today. So, Kate, what were we expecting going into this event? Sorry, one last thing before I get into that. We're experimenting with YouTube Live here, so you'll notice me moving the camera a little bit, and we might be having some problems with audio. We'd like to try out some of the new methods for reaching out to our community. We've done a lot of Facebook Live, and today we wanted to try YouTube Live. Anyhow, now back to the question. So what were we expecting to hear?
Yeah, so obviously the Justice Department touches on a ton of issues. Not all of them are kind of our core issues, although a lot of them are. So I think we were, hopeful that we would hear some of the topics we care about being brought up, and we did. But obviously a lot of the hearing went to things like voting rights and violence against women and Sessions' background legally, but before he became a senator. So, a lot of the hearing was about crucial issues that we don't closely follow, and every once in a while they touched on our stuff, which was exciting.
What's an example of one of the things that he touched on that we found interesting?
So I think especially interesting to anyone following, the surveillance debate was Senator John Cornyn, who sits on the Judiciary Committee, asked about kind of in one go a slew of privacy issues. So everything from like Section 702 of FISA, which is a lot of online surveillance, to things like the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, to national security letters. And unfortunately, that exchange was pretty limited because it was mostly just Cornyn talking about the need to advance national security in ways that we are kind of troubled with. And Sessions, I think he only said, I will. I will take those concerns into account. It wasn't a super substantive back and forth, but, it obviously put him on the record kind of supporting a lot of the things that we're worried about.
It seemed like a lot of the time Senator Sessions did tend to dodge questions. Today, Senator Klobuchar kind of complained a little bit that when she had asked him about what he would do to protect journalists, that she got non-committal answers. And what she had raised is that Senator Sessions was not supportive of the Free Flow of Information Act, which is the journalist shield law. And we had some issues with that legislation as well. And we had worked on that, and there were things that we didn't like, and there were things that were better. But she'd also asked him about Attorney General Eric Holder's 2015 memo limiting when the DOJ can access journalist records, and whether he'd be putting journalists in jail for doing their job. And Sessions, said he'd just basically have to do more research on that, which I certainly would have liked to have heard more commitment to free press from the Attorney General. But, sometimes you don't get what you want.
Yeah, I think we saw a lot of Sessions kind of not disavowing, but trying to walk back from positions he's taken as a senator and say, as Attorney General, my job would not be to decide what the law is. That's Congress's job. My job is just to enforce the law, which I think, maybe intentionally misses kind of the nuance of being Attorney General, which is that you get to decide what your enforcement priorities are. And so there's a lot of leeway in terms of what you make a priority and kind of which laws get enforced more fully than others. But he was very hesitant to comment on, any legislation that he had supported or opposed or would support or oppose, and kind of just focused on, following the rule of law as Attorney General.
Who are some of the senators who really brought up issues related to privacy and civil liberties during the hearing?
So obviously, Klobuchar kind of talked about the free press, which is really interesting. Senator Leahy brought up this idea that Trump has supported sometimes in the past about creating a registry of Muslims in this country to kind of keep track of, who is where and what they believe, and even the idea of, strong, extreme vetting to make sure that people from countries with high terrorist rates are not coming into the country. And Sessions, did not. He said that he thinks that it's okay to use religion as a factor when determining if someone should be admitted to the country, which is obviously troubling from a First Amendment perspective. Senator Leahy was definitely very big on that. And you heard kind of bits and pieces here, but a lot of people focus really on the, Sessions' legal background and a lot of voting rights stuff.
What kind of, to what extent did Senator Sessions agree with some of the statements Trump made versus, did he try to distance himself in some cases?
Yeah, that was interesting. So he, the nice thing about Senator Sessions is that he is a senator, and so we have his whole voting record to look at in terms of what he's supported and opposed in the past. Not everything that he's supported or opposed perfectly aligns with what Trump has said, and he, I think, had to walk a careful line of trying to, appeal to his colleagues on the Senate who know about his voting record and not directly contradict, the president-elect, who may very well soon be his boss. So, if you look at the allegations that Russia was involved with the DNC hack this past year, Trump has obviously been, very critical of those allegations, and I think that kind of changes daily, but he certainly has asked some questions about whether or not Russia was involved. And Senator Sessions has worked closely with the FBI and had to say, I think that they did honorable work, and if I'm sure they reached the conclusion they reached on the merits, and, not say that Trump was wrong in questioning the FBI, but also not throw the FBI under the bus. So he had to walk that line pretty carefully.
Were there things that we had hoped would be brought up that just weren't addressed during this hearing?
Sure. So kind of one example that I work on a lot is Rule 41. So the changes to the search warrant rules that went into effect December 1st and effectively let law enforcement get access to an untold number of computers wherever they are with one warrant. That is something that is overseen by the Justice Department, and the Justice Department kind of led the charge in asking for that rule change. It would have been great if lawmakers had brought that up and tried to get some kind of solid commitments out of Senator Sessions if he becomes Attorney General to report back to Congress and to kind of, ideally issue guidelines about how that new aspect of search warrants is used. But things like that we didn't hear about at all in the hearing.
So, as Attorney General, just for people who aren't necessarily, we have a lot of overseas viewers supporters who don't necessarily understand what the role is of the Attorney General. What does the Department of Justice cover?
What don't they cover? The Department of Justice covers a lot, and I think that's why you saw, 10 plus hours of the hearing yesterday. They deal with, they're the chief law enforcement office in this country. So at the federal level, they kind of are in charge of all things that touch on law enforcement. That includes the FBI. That also includes the way the federal government works with state and local law enforcement offices, and deciding to enforce, for instance, marijuana laws. If this came up a little bit with Sessions, where it's if in his state of Alabama a certain strain of marijuana is legal for certain purposes, but it's still illegal at a federal level, does he choose to enforce the federal law and kind of overrule the Alabama law, or how does he handle that? So the Attorney General really is in charge of covers a lot.
Yeah. So we're talking about the DEA. There are certain things like the DHS and ICE. ICE and Border Patrol, those come under the DHS, which is a different department. Although he was asked a lot of questions related to immigration and particularly policies that he had voted on when he was in the Senate. But DOJ is, the FBI, the DEA. There's if it's a law enforcement organ, a lot of times it comes under the Department of Justice. They also make a lot of opinions, and, there was a lot of issues that came up about to what extent he might recuse himself from certain cases that may involve people who were, on the campaign or involving opponents on the other side of the campaign. And I found that interesting as well. He did seem to express that he would take it on a case-by-case basis, not totally closing off the idea of having independent counsel, but that was another area where it was a little non-committal, I think.
Yeah, he did commit to recuse himself with anything involving a Clinton investigation about Hillary Clinton, because he'd kind of been so vocal about her when he was when Trump was campaigning and he was supporting Trump. But there are definitely other things where, if somebody brought up what happens if the FBI finds ties to Trump or his campaign or his affiliates or whoever, and Russia in relation to this DNC hack, are you as Attorney General going to prosecute Trump or Trump's family or Trump's business associates? And a lot of that's obviously a big hypothetical, but Sessions was kind of non-committal and said that he would have to see, where things go, and he hasn't talked about Russia publicly, so therefore he's not obligated to recuse himself in the same way he would be with Clinton. But yeah, you're right, a lot of the talk about recusal was pretty non-committal from him.
So procedurally, what happens at this point? When they finish up their hearings today, what happens?
So the Senate Judiciary Committee has to vote on him, and then the full Senate will have to vote. And he only needs a simple majority, and Republicans have that simple majority. And I think we saw in the hearing that Republicans are very hesitant to be critical of Sessions or, in any way kind of cast him in a negative light, which makes sense because they've worked with him for years in the Senate. So, at this point, it's, I think, looking good for him. And yeah, they just need 51 votes to pass him in the Senate.
Do we know when he would assume office, if approved?
I mean, I know that the Trump people have been super eager to get folks in when he's inaugurated. In terms of timing, I think that depends a lot on, if the Senate Judiciary Committee decides to, when they decide to hold a vote, and then how quickly they can move him to the floor.
Yeah. It's probably also worth noting that across the country, there are U.S. attorneys who represent various districts and do the day-to-day prosecutorial work of the Department of Justice. And at this point, when one administration takes over, a lot of them start to leave. In fact, I think most, if not all, sort of leave. Who gets to appoint those U.S. attorneys?
I've never followed the U.S. attorney appointment process. I'm not super familiar with it. But obviously they all go through the same confirmation process, that they do. So there'll certainly be a chance to kind of vet them on that level.
Okay. That makes sense. I just wanted to sort of check whether we have any questions that came in. We apparently have not, but that's, what happens when you experiment with new technology. Sometimes people have questions and they don't. But, feel free to hit us up on Twitter and keep following the live blog. This video that we're recording right now will be available on our YouTube page, along with lots of other videos that we tend to make. And hopefully we'll do more video sessions like this in the future. We want to thank you for joining us, and I want to thank Kate for putting in some long hours to make this possible. It is quite the journey to live blog a hearing. Anyhow, thank you very much, and I'm going to go ahead and shut off the live blog now, or the live video. Thank you so much.